Thank you, and welcome back to the Patriots 300 Level Podcast. My name is Eric. I'm joined by my co-host Kevin. Welcome back for our 56th episode this week after a little off-season hiatus as we review and preview the Patriots 2023 preseason and training camp. As a reminder, you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Pat's 300 Level Pod for up-to-the-minute updates and commentary on news of the day, as well as at our website at pats300levelpod.com. And just a little nugget, just be on the lookout for a blog that should be coming out in the coming days, if not already posted by the time this episode airs. So Kevin, what's your overall, I know it's been a while, football is back, Patriots are back. What's your thoughts so far? It's a little tough to fully say, but through training camp, off season, and the preseason since the last time we've talked.
Yeah, it's been a little nice little hiatus we've been on, a little break, recharge the batteries. Been good to get back though. I've been watching all the preseason games, went to training camp a few times, see the practices. So it's been a nice little kind of off season so far. I think overall, I think just really excited just to see what this team is going to do. You could already tell the difference looking at the offense this year compared to last year, where last year it was pretty much just frustration overall from pretty much all the players, from the linemen to the wide receivers to obviously Mac, and just didn't seem like anything was getting going, and they were never able to kind of capitalize where usually you want to build on from one day to the next, and they never really could do that because they couldn't really hone in on what they were doing each day, where they couldn't succeed in one thing, so they couldn't build upon that success and build and get more success. So it was pretty much just constant failure last year, headed by Matt and Joe, which we've said this before, I'll say it again, I don't think either of us really saw how bad that combination was going to be. I think everyone thought there was going to be some growing pains, but it just stayed bad the whole time. And it's kind of interesting, but
and going along the lines of that too, which it kind of seemed like it got worse as the season got on. You would think it would be the opposite, where it might be brutal in the beginning, but as they got their bearings, it would turn around. But I remember the first few games of the season, it was like if the play calling wasn't that much different. It was like there weren't really too many plays that Josh would have not called in those situations. But I think what kind of made it worse is the offensive coordinator is more than just play calling. It's teaching, it's being the leader in the development. And I think that's where you kind of see it got worse and worse as the year got on. So I think having Bill O'Brien back who's one of the top 3 offensive minds in football as your offensive coordinator should definitely help. So we'll have to wait and see, but
yeah, you could definitely tell that's one of the biggest differences, where last year they weren't knowing the whys, because honestly, I don't think they knew the reason why they were doing some of the things they were doing. And Bill O'Brien has a vast kind of range of learning different offenses. So he's come from he did the Patriots offense, then he changed things a little bit at Penn, and then he changed a little bit things with Houston, and then he learned the Alabama offense. So he's coming in with this wide range of different offenses, and I think that's only going to help him. And I actually think, and you and me, I think both like Josh McDaniels, and think he was a really good offensive coach and probably one of the best ones in the league. I actually think that Bill O'Brien's going to be a kind of a nice change of kind of pace from what Josh is doing, just because Josh, I think, got a little stale towards the end, where he's running the same stuff over and over. There wasn't too much kind of changes that were put into it. You did see a little bit towards the end of Mac's rookie year when he was incorporating a few RPOs and that sort of stuff. But I think Bill might be able to do a little bit more just because he's seen more and done more. So that should be interesting. I really like the kind of quote that he had. I don't know if you retweeted or I did, but when he made the comment that being a offensive coordinator isn't rocket science, and I think that is a nice little jab to Matty P for really failing since he's technically a rocket scientist. So,
and I think one thing difference between O'Brien and McDaniels is most of McDaniel, or pretty much all of McDaniel's success, has come at the benefit of Tom Brady as his quarterback. He had did McDaniels leave after 07 with the perfect season, or was it after 08 with Castle? But anyway,
I think he had Castle, and then he lost. Okay. I think.
And Castle did do well, but again, that was a team that was coming off a perfect season.
Mhm.
But O'Brien has had a lot of success. He had success with Brady, but he also had success in Houston with Brian Hoyer as his starting
Mhm.
quarterback for the year. Ryan Mallett, rest in peace, as his
Mhm.
starting quarterback. And that's something that even in Alabama, granted, Bryce Young, I think, is going to be the real deal. But he's had success with multiple quarterbacks. And in Houston, he was able to win the division, granted a different division,
Mhm.
with Brian Hoyer as his quarterback. And I know some people don't believe in Mac Jones. I know I do, and you are a pretty big believer as well. But
Mhm.
even Mac Jones might not have to be a top 10, top five quarterback for this offense to have success. And might not win the division considering Buffalo is the elephant in the room, but you might be able to still make it to the playoffs. And then, as we've seen, anything can happen. Tennessee with Ryan
Mhm.
Tannehill as their quarterback made it all the way to the AFC Championship game. So, having an offensive quarter or offensive mind as good as O'Brien can definitely help this team in this skill set.
Yeah, completely agree. And I think before we get on, I forget to put this in the notes, but just jogged my memory of this. Before we get on about like the rest of the offense and defense, I think one of the things we wanted to talk about too, which we mentioned together, and I think we've commented a little bit on Twitter if you're following our posts and whatnot, but just kind of the off season um the journalism going around this team and
Yes.
how kind
Yep.
of despicable it's become, where you can really tell when you actually look at, there's only probably what, a handful of different journalists that I actually respect anymore,
Yeah.
that cover this team, that actually give real unbiased coverage, that aren't trying to get out of the clicks. It's getting a little ridiculous. You got Greg
Yeah.
Bedard out there that he's trying to play hot and cold, trying to basically sound like he's trying to predict whatever. He's basically saying, oh, they're going to win 10 and 11 games, or they might not. They really stink, and it's Bill's fault and all this sort of stuff. And he's trying to play both ends of the spectrum. That way he could say he was right, where you got to pick one. You can't be this pitter patter. And then he's obviously going for the sound bites all the time. You look at any of his NBC Sports headlines and clips, they're always these ridiculous claims. And it's not just him. It's a lot of those people in that station. And I think part of their thing is that that's what they're asking them to do, and that they're going back, and it's basically a job. So if they're going to say we're going to pay you $100, or I think it's $100 for a half hour, then you're going to do it because that adds up over time. But between him and Karin, and even Phil Perry's getting like this, Burt
Phil
Breer's,
Perry was like this last year too. It's not
no,
starting to get there.
well, he didn't used to always be like this. I'm saying,
Yeah. Burt Breer,
Burt Breer,
Giardi
um,
now.
Giardi now, ever since he went to BSJ, and it's ridiculous. There's a
Yeah.
handful of people out there that you should actually, other than us, if you're listening,
Yeah.
there's a handful of people out there that we would highly recommend. Mike Reese, um,
Zach
Mark
Cox,
Zach Cox, Mark Daniels, uh,
Taylor Kyles.
I couldn't remember his last name. So those few people. So just
And
wanted
there
to.
are some others as well. It's not
Mhm.
just those four, and it's not saying the entire media is bad, but it
You
seems
just
like it's
have to
getting
pick and
worse and
choose,
worse.
and you have to really, when you see a report, you have to take it with a grain of salt and say, is everyone else saying this? Does this actually make sense?
Yeah.
And a lot of it doesn't. Like, so you have to really start inspecting what the different journalism is. Is this just a clickbait article where they're trying to get you to go in and read this and see whatnot?
And
But
an important thing too is you have to read the wording.
mhm.
Where Burt Breer's specialty, and then we saw this with Giardi with some things too, is they have an opinion with that they think is probably the case. But they word it so it seems like it's a report, but they're not actually saying it's a report. And then that gets clicks. It has people like Dov Kleiman like reporting it as a report, even though it's not. So part of it is just reading the wording specifically, and and also knowing who the source is of where
Mhm.
it's coming from, and you kind of can assess if it's a real report or not. But I've just been on Twitter the last few years, ever since we started this podcast, and I wasn't before. So I don't know if it's just getting worse and worse, and I just wasn't aware of it. Granted, the Patriots were also winning during those time frames, but it just seems like it's getting worse. And part of it is because, like you said, it's a business. The hot takes sell, which is why Colin Cowherd still has a job. People want to be the next Mike Felger and things like that. But it's just as a trying to be as unbiased as possible of a fan of football or just the Patriots in general. It's kind of just so frustrating seeing so many, it's pretty much slanderism of different people, of Mac Jones,
Mhm.
of the Patriots in general, how I can't take it.
All right.
I'm glad
Glad.
I'm on the West Coast and don't have to listen to sports talk radio out on the East Coast.
All right. So glad I got that out there.
Yep.
And we're not the only ones saying this too, where Kirk Minahan was in Boston media and blatantly called out saying that he knows for a fact that Tom Curran and Burt Breer make things up.
Yeah.
So and he's worked with them. So just take that also. So it's not just us saying it. It's people that have actually worked with these people, knowing
And
that they
Greg
actually
Bedard
make it up.
admitted it into a DM to you too, saying that
Yep.
the radio and the TV is different than actual reporting. So
Mhm.
like the hot takes pretty much sell.
Yep. All right, moving on. Other than kind of just the overall feeling with the offense feeling a lot better. One recent news I don't think we've been able to hit on since we've been back. Well, because we were off, was Patriots signing Zeke Elliott. I think it was a really low risk signing. There's
Yep.
not really too much money guaranteed with him. And what are your kind of thoughts on that? A lot of people like to
No,
talk about it. He's a big name, but honestly, he's a running back, so what does it really matter? So.
yeah, no, I think it's a good signing, a good depth piece. I don't think he's going to be the Zeke Elliott from 4 or 5 years ago, where he's an all-pro rushing for 1,600 yards and 15 to 20 touchdowns. I think what we saw last year, especially when the signing came out and you saw that it was reported up to 6 million and people were freaking out because Damian Harris signed for 1.6. You and me both like Damian Harris. We like his style of running, but as we've seen, he can't stay healthy. He can't stay on the field. And
Mhm.
because of that, you can't depend on him. And last year, as the season went on, when he was out with like a pulled hamstring or whatever it is, Mondre was getting 99, 100% of the snaps, and it kind of got to him as the season went on. We saw 3 of his 4 fumbles came in the last 3 weeks. He was starting to get more drops. So having a different running back who has a similar style to him, even though he is getting older, is going to help spot Mondre so he's able to be the player he is and possibly even take that next step of being a top 5 running back this year. I want to bet on it being a fantasy owner just because of how the Patriots they play the matchups. He might get run for 160 yards, 3 touchdowns one week, and then only have 5 carries the next.
Mhm.
But I think Zeke having a similar style, still being productive last year, running for almost 1,000 yards and over. I think he had 12 touchdowns last year.
Mhm.
So he might not be the same, but also not having to have that workload as well can keep Zeke fresh. So when he does come in the game, he's able to be productive. But in addition to that, he's also a very good blocker, which is key in the Patriots system, especially on third down. So he can catch the ball out of the backfield, but he can also pick up blitzes and help Mac, especially considering we'll get to this a little later, but one of the issues last year and so far this year has been the offensive line. So I really like it. Like you said, it's a low risk, high reward, not a lot of money, especially for a running back, but it
Mhm.
helps give them depth that they pretty much needed at that position, considering their other 2 players were rookies last year.
Yep. Yeah. So I think that you probably pretty much hit everything on the head with that. Not really much I would disagree with. Not really anything I disagree with. Not really much for me to add. Anything else on the offense you want to really discuss? We really mentioned Bill O'Brien being back, the wide receivers being a lot more comfortable than they were last year. I think the rookie class will get into it a little bit. So we can kind of skip over them for now. And Mac just looking a lot more comfortable, looking kind of like he's taking that step forward from year one, where basically I think I feel like the Patriots coaches are probably doing the same thing where they're just kind of throwing out last year, where
Yeah.
everyone has a clean slate. Everything's going to be a continuation from the year before for everyone that was on this team. So you're seeing that with Bourne, you're seeing that
Yeah.
with Mac, you're seeing that with pretty much anyone that's on the team before. It looks like they're taking that next step forward on offense.
Yeah. No, I agree with that completely. And I know a lot of people were hoping that they would go out and get a number 1 wide receiver. There
Mhm.
weren't really any number 1 wide receivers out there. The top 2 on the free agent market was Juju, who they ended up getting, and then Jacoby Myers, who they let go,
Mhm.
which you can argue for or against if Juju's better than Jacoby. But other than that, you're either trading a lot of capital for a young wide receiver who's going to be getting paid a lot of money, or you're taking a risk on someone like DeAndre Hopkins, who has missed some games the last couple of years. It still was very productive when he came back from his suspension last year, but again, he is getting older, so you don't really know what you're going to be getting, especially with the money he got paid.
Mhm.
So I know a lot of people were hoping for more acquisitions, But you did, like you said, you're hoping that the wide receivers you already have take that next step. You added Mike Gesicki, who's essentially a giant slot receiver, and then the rookies that you've got who are pretty much low risk, potentially high reward, and so far panning out. We don't know if that'll actually translate to the season. We've seen that before with some training camp people that once the season comes along, playing against number ones, they don't really make it. But we'll have to see.
Yep. And I think the other thing to really hit on with, because I don't think we had a podcast since the Hopkins news broke,
Yeah.
was just, and we've talked about this and tweeted about it before, where we weren't like fully high on signing Hopkins. It would be fine if they got him, but it wasn't something we're clamoring saying they need to do this, they need to get number one, because
Yeah.
their whole problem last year was speed and quickness and getting off the line and getting open quick, and that's not something that he's known for. So, and he's 31 years old, like you said. He's not fast, particularly to begin with right now. What is he going to look like once you start slowing down? So is that really worth how much that they're going to be paying? Where you have Parker, which he's not the same wide receiver as Hopkins, but he's getting paid what, a third, a quarter of what Hopkins is getting? Is he really getting a third or a quarter of the production? No, he's probably like maybe a 60-70% of what Hopkins would give you. So the value there, they could say, is the value is much better at Parker, and then have everyone else improve. The other thing, what was I gonna say? I'm pulling Rick Perry here. That's a name from the past. All right, let's go on to the defense. Something else popped in my head. But the other thing that I was going to say was, you had mentioned trading for a young wide receiver. There was no wide receiver available, as we saw this year. There's no one you could trade for, where usually every year, besides this year, there was somebody that you could trade for.
Which, granted, in the previous years, you didn't hear their names come across as being on the trade block, like AJ Brown, you didn't know, Hollywood Brown, you didn't know. So you could always inquire about that, but we didn't see any. I think what the point you're trying to get at is we didn't see.
I
any
think if
young
someone was
traded.
available and was traded, it would have happened somewhere.
Yeah.
So it may not be the Patriots, it may have been someone else. But the fact that no one was able to trade for one means either the asking price was so ridiculous that no one wanted to do it, or just no one was available that was good enough in the same. That there was no Adams or Hill or Diggs or any of those type of wide receivers that have lately been available. They weren't available this year, and that's really who you really need to target if you're going to target to get someone. And you could say Jerry Jeudy maybe was, but even at that, was he even available when Sean Payton took over? And
is it worth is he worth the price that you would have had to give up for someone whose production hasn't matched that? His potential matches that, but his production so far has not.
And what happens if Sean Payton says, I really like this guy, and I think he's been underused. Why am I going to give him up? So if he is willing to give him up, maybe there is a problem with him. So that's just the other thing. All right, going into defense, I think there's not really much to cover this. It's pretty much a continuation from last year with improvements, I would say. I think they're looking even better than they did last year. I think they're going to be a top 5 defense. You could say even top 3, top 2. They're looking pretty strong there. They have a better corner group this year. They've got more experience now with the rookies from last year. And I think they've just improved in pretty much every position. You look at the rookies that they have. They finally have with Mapu a quick linebacker and who could play all over the place. He could play linebacker, he could play edge, he could play corner, he could play safety, he could play pretty much anywhere. So they're getting a lot more versatility, and I think they're in a pretty good position with there. So I'm not sure what else you'd like to add.
I think the only loss, or not think, the only loss so far has been McCourty, who is a big loss because he played 99% of the snaps last year. He's been the defensive play caller on the field for the last however many years, defensive captain. So it is a loss, but I think the players you can have, when McCourty was on the field, you pretty much knew McCourty was the safety. Whereas with the 4 safeties you have Adrian Phillips, you have Jabril Peppers, we saw him get better and better as the season comes on. And a lot of people don't realize this. People really like Kyle Duggar. He's the same age as Kyle Duggar. But you have Peppers, you have Duggar, you have Phillips, and probably Jalen Mills all playing the safety role. And quarterbacks won't really know who's playing where. It gives the defense a lot more flexibility, a lot more disguise in their scheme. which I think could help them. So it definitely is a loss with McCourty, but it might actually turn into a strength for them with that. But like you said, you added at cornerback with Gonzo, and then possibly Bolden and speed, depending on if Bolden's able to come back healthy. And then speed gives you some speed and size. Granted, I'm not sure if he'll make the roster, but he does give you that length and speed. And then up Mapu, like you said, adds to the safety group as well as linebacker. And then Keon White is just an absolute freak of nature, and I love it.
He's like a Greek Adonis. He's huge, and I'm really interested to see how they use him. And this is the point where I would say because him and Wise are a very similar type of position and player, and it's going to be interesting to see what they do because there's only so many people you could put out there at once. So how are they going to kind of have this all kind of intertwine? I think that's going to be really interesting to see. And is he going to eat into Wise's snaps? Which you know me, I'd love to see that. But also, Wise actually played really well last year too. So, who knows?
They have so much depth on their defensive line. Which our first block coming out was going to be our projections for the 53-man roster, and it was just so difficult projecting that spot because not only do you have so many people, but you have such good quality, and then it's measuring who has the potential versus who has the right now fits that mold. I could see them Keon eating into Wise's snaps. I could see them playing essentially 6 down linemen essentially with the edge where you have Barmore or 5. You have Barmore, White, Wise, and then Judon and Uche coming off the edge with Mapu, Tavai, or Mapu and Bentley at linebacker. So there's so many different combinations that you can have while keeping everyone fresh as well.
All right. Going in. Usually we do 3 up, 3 down. We're gonna do 5 up, 5 down, just because it's been a long kind of training camp and preseason so far. So who you got for? I can go first. So for the 5 up, I've got Mac, Bourne, Douglas, White, and Gonzalez. So there's a little bit of a theme there, which you're going to piggyback off of. But I think Mac, again, he looks like he's taking that next step forward. His completion percentage is higher than it was last training camp. It's more on pace for what he normally is. And he just looks more reinvigorated. He looks like he's taking that next step forward. And it looks like I think he's going to have a really good year this year. I think that we're going to see him rookie year. You could say he was a top 15 quarterback. I think he's going to definitely knock on the door to be a top 10 quarterback this year, assuming everything goes right and assuming he stays healthy. I think the other thing that helps him in that favor is when you actually look at the quarterback list, pretty much after, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7, they all kind of stink. So they're all not really stink, but they're all about the same type of player. So I think it's this year of all the years, I feel like getting into the top 10 is actually a lot easier than it's been the years past where we've lost like Brady and Rodgers is maybe at the twilight of his career and Wilson just completely fell off a cliff. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with him. This Jarrett Stidham take over for him in Denver if he continues to stink for the first 4 or 5 games. So interesting there. All right. Stay quickly though. Bourne, again, we've seen him look like he's taking the extension from the year before, and is really one of Mac's favorite targets out there. He's looking the part, is bigger, stronger, faster. Then Douglas, looking like he could be a steal from the 6th round. Very shifty, quick. He lose a single one-on-one drill at all that in any practices open to the media or the public. And then, like you said, White is like a Greek Adonis, and Gonzalez is showing that he could be a lockdown corner eventually for them. And he's definitely going to be one of their starting corners.
Yep. No, I agree. I think that's a good list. And as you'll see, mine pretty much encompasses all of that and then some. So my number 1 was just the entire 2023 rookie class. And I'll get to that in a minute. There's just so many that if I didn't go with that as just its own number 1, my top 5 would just be 5 players from the rookie class. Pretty much Gonzo, White, Mapu, Douglas, and then Booty or Butte. Number 2
he said Booty.
I'm not sure the actual pronunciation, but
that's what he said when they asked him at LSU.
Okay. Number 2, Mac, like you said, pretty much everything. Last year going into the season, we highlighted the fact that a lot of rookie quarterbacks year 2 is the we see them either take that next step or they plateau. I think Mac is in a little bit of a different situation this year just because of the whole situation he had last year with Patricia. And this is really going to be his make it or break it year where can he take that next step? I think he can. I've been high on him since he was at Bama. But also we've seen him make some throws in training camp that he wasn't able to make his rookie year and even last year. He's added some velocity, he's added some arm strength, and then his decision making has been getting better too. At least in camp so far. We'll see if it really translates when the season comes along. But so far, he's been really good. Born pretty much everything you said. Parker has had a good camp. He's had a lot of good catches, some contested balls, and he could be that jump ball end zone threat that they were kind of forcing last year. But if the whole offense is running on all cylinders, you don't have to force it. If it's there, it's there. If it's not, you go another avenue. But just going back to the rookie class, since I pretty much listed the other three players, I just went with four up, but pretty much everything you said with Gonzo. White has been really good. Mapu's all over the place. Booty is showing that why he was a potential top 10 talent when he was at LSU, why he has the record for fastest to 100 receptions in LSU history. And that's impressive considering Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, and Odell Beckham all went to LSU. Douglas has been very shifty, very elusive, and he could be, I know he's pretty much playing the role that you were hoping Marcus Jones would play on offense this year, where he gives you some shiftiness, can possibly the slot receiver. And then also Bolden has just really impressed me so far. Granted, it's very unfortunate the injury situation that occurred during the preseason game versus Green Bay. It looks like it's at least encouraging the news, not as severe as it looked like on the field. But again, with concussions, you never know the timetable. He could be out all year. It could be something that he could come back in a few weeks. So we'll just have to wait and see on him. And then it's just all the people in the middle. They added some depth on the offensive line. Haven't really been as promising as we would have seen. But again, with some offensive linemen, it takes a couple of years. Some they're able to fill in right away. So we'll have to wait and see. And then Ryland and the punter, Barringer, have been encouraging so far. You never know again with those positions when the season comes along. But overall, just very impressive rookie class. And they have the potential to really, if they hit on those 4 or 5 of those players, if they end up being the players that they've shown so far in camp, this draft class can really set this franchise forward for years to come.
All right. So 5 down. I don't think this one actually have 5 either. But
I have 4
it's
for
basically one of them's a pretty big one. So I've got the offensive line health and depth because it's kind of a combination one where the health goes into the depth. Ty Montgomery, Perkins, Guy, and Tyquan Thornton. So again, O-line health and depth. We haven't really seen the full starting offensive line yet, just because no one's been healthy enough. One who's still on PUP. Strange hasn't played since he hurt his knee. And then Trent Brown just came back recently. So getting them into a rhythm has been a little bit tough. And we've seen it with in the preseason games. They've been pretty horrendous. So there's still some time to get them back. And of course, Strange is definitely going to probably play. One who seems like it's tracking closer that he might be able to. And then Trent with getting some more reps, it should somewhat help. So it has the potential to be fine, especially with the new coaching that they have, and then some of the rookie players. But it is just a little concerning that how poor they've looked. But a lot of teams have looked poor so far.
Yeah. I'm gonna just jump in just since O-line was my number one as well, just to go back to back on this. It definitely is a concern, especially at the tackle position, and at you need tackles to just pretty much run your offense. We'll have to see with Trent Brown coming back. It looks like he's been getting better, starting to get into football shape and being that offensive tackle that they traded for. Riley Reef actually played. They shifted him into guard the last game. If Michael Onwenu is going to be out for a little while, that might be encouraging if Reef can take his place. But it just depends on who can be that right tackle. If Onwenu is going to be out for a while, it might have to be I don't know. It might be McDermott. It might be Bill Murray who played there. It
Mhm.
might be Struber. It might be City Sow. So we'll have to wait and see. Or if Onwenu comes back, shift him out to right tackle again, where he played a couple years ago and was an all pro caliber right tackle. He didn't get all pro, but that might be your best offensive line combination with Onwenu at tackle, which we were saying last year too. But
Mhm.
just given the offensive line depth, it didn't work out. But they do have good depth based on the at least on paper with the
Mhm.
players they drafted. But again, you don't really know how those players are going to be in game situations, especially going from the college game to the NFL. So we'll have to wait and see on that. It definitely is a concern though.
Right. Next one, I got Ty Montgomery. It's just frustrating with him because he looks the part. He's quick. It looks like he'd be that nice receiving back for them, and he just can't stay healthy. It's the second year where he's gotten hurt, and he hasn't been out for a while now. And part of it, I think, is maybe is he too big? Like he's too muscular because he is jacked. So I wonder if that's the case. And but that's just a little frustrating for me. Perkins, the same thing, where he was a third round draft pick 2 years ago, was hurt last year, hurt again this year. You're not going to see the field if you don't play. So
Yeah.
if he can't stay healthy, he's not going to make the team. So there's going to be another year in IR. They're just going to cut him. What are they going to do with him? But he had a lot of potential coming out and not really seeing anything for it. Lawrence Guy, this is just really a subtle thing with me where I didn't like this holdout because he was actually probably one of the surprise cuts on there. And why is he trying to hold out for more money where he's probably not going to get it? And he's on the kind of the end of his career. And I would have been more likely to see like a retirement rather than a holdout, which I thought was kind of odd. And he was kind of pushed back last game. It was on 1 or 2 plays. So I don't think anything too concerning, but just one thing to throw out there. And then again, injury wise, Tyquan Thornton, he can't stay healthy. And we've seen that now twice where he starts to do really well and then he gets hurt. So hopefully it's not anything too long and it lingers, but we'll have to see on that.
Yeah, I think those are all good picks. For me, my number two was Taekwon, and just jumping on what you're saying is he just can't seem to stay healthy. Last year in training camp, he really looked like he was the part. He looked like he could be the finally the hit that the Patriots have on a top four, top three round wide receiver. And then he got hurt, and that kind of set him back his whole rookie year. And then this year, he's kind of started off the spring pretty well too, and then he got hurt again, and now he's just not making that next step. And then he's getting jumped on the depth chart, it seems, by Demario Douglas and then possibly Booty as well.
Mhm.
And I think they'll possibly put him. I think they'll carry six wide receivers. I think there's no way that they're going to let Booty and Douglas go. And with the contract situations of Parker and Juju, they're not getting rid of them. And with Bourne's emergence, I don't think they're trading him. So it just depends on, are they going to either carry six? Are they going to put Taekwon on IR? Or maybe Taekwon could even be a surprise cut. I don't think so, considering the crapshoot that he was in last year. I think they'd want to give him one more year to develop, but I wouldn't be shocked if Taekwon's cut, to be honest, just considering the other players around them and his injury concern. And then,
Oh, I was
we're
just
gonna
gonna
say,
say I can't envision a scenario where they would cut him. I think the worst case scenario would be that they would just IR him
yeah,
even before the cut down. That way his whole season's lost. But I
yeah,
wouldn't see them cutting him. But I would more likely see them carrying him into after cut down day and then IRing him for 4 weeks,
yeah.
which I think is more likely.
I could see that too, which I think I was kind of having this issue when I was doing the roster projections is you don't have as many players this year that you could are veterans that would cut but would be bring back, where before it was Nick Falk or Brian Hoyer, James Ferentz. You don't really have many that are in that position where they'd be cut and then coming back on the team. Most of those players, if they're going to be cut, they're going onto the practice squad. So I'm sure you can find one or two players that you can do it with. But that is one of the issues where you don't have as many of those veterans that are cut, then no one else is going to sign and then bring back or things like that. So I also don't think he's going to get cut, but I wouldn't be shocked. Is just the point I was trying to make.
Okay.
And then my third down is, and just last one is just the 2022 rookie running backs, with Strong and Harris, where last year it was pretty much a redshirt year for both of them. They played a little bit the last couple of games of the season, especially when Damian Harris went down.
Mm-hmm.
But usually we've seen that in the past, and then they take that next step forward year two. I was really envisioning Strong being that third down running back, especially considering his speed, his ability to do that at, I believe it was South Dakota State where he went to college.
Mm-hmm.
So far for both him and Harris, they haven't really stepped up yet this training camp and preseason. Part of it is just given the offensive line situation where there were some practices where you didn't have a single first team player practicing, first team offensive line player, and also with the tackle situations as well. But counterpoint to that is you also, if you want to be a running back in the NFL, you also don't want to be someone that if there's no hole in front of you, you're not going to go anywhere. Sometimes you have to make yards on your own. And it's still early. I still have faith in at least Strong considering his speed, and then Kevin Harris as well. But I just really would like to see more from them. And that's all I had.
All right, sounds good. So now we're just gonna move on to our mailbag before we wrap up. So this comes from at Pat's fan Kev. He's one of our very frequent mailbag submitters. And again, he's not my burner, even though it sounds like he would be. So his question: do you think Mondre will get a long-term deal if he has another solid season, or will Bill Belichick continue to draft and move on from running backs? I think this one is just a little tricky. Usually, I would have a clear-cut answer, but the fact that Bill kind of really overly glowingly remarks about Mondre, where usually you don't hear that from him for an active player. So that's just the one tough part there. He really likes Mondre. Yeah. But long-term deal in a running back is we've seen it across the NFL. We've seen it with the Bill, and I feel like Bill started the whole trend where everyone else was kind of a little late to the game. Yeah. But once a running back gets to their second contract, they're usually cooked, especially someone that has a lot of carries, that relies on their quickness and speed and shiftiness, and that's something that Mondre does. If he's able to get him at a relatively normal rate, I would say he would do it. But I don't think he's going to break the bank for Mondre. I don't think he's going to treat him like a really high paid running back from years past, where like a Todd Gurley contract or something like that. So I don't see him overextending himself for Mondre. But if he can get like a team friendly deal and maybe do it early, maybe that might be something that they'll both agree on, especially if Mondre looks out and sees what the running back field is really looking like for contracts, and saying pretty much anyone that goes into their second contract now isn't getting paid. So is he going to try and more likely take more of a team friendly deal that's kind of benefits him a little bit more, so he doesn't have to try and get to the open market and find out no one's going to pay him? So I could maybe see that if it's a relatively cost-effective move, but if not, then Bill's going to just do what he always does and walk away and get someone else to fill a position.
Yeah, this is a really interesting question. And initially, once I saw it, my initial instinct was no. Mm-hmm. I don't think he gets a long-term deal. I think they move on just like Bill has always done. But there's a couple different caveats that I think might play a role into this. Like you said, Bill really likes Mondre. Another thing, too, is Mondre is a very muscular back. And those are typically the ones that kind of hold up a little bit. Adrian Peterson, Sean Alexander going years back, even Derrick Henry, minus the foot injury. Mondre kind of fits that build where he's not the smaller guy that he's going to take a pounding and then lose his strength. So that might play a role into it. Another thing is given the whole running back paying situation where they were trying to figure out what to do because of Jonathan Taylor's situation where he wants a long-term deal. Jim Irsay said, no, go screw yourself. And then pretty much trying to figure that out now. So one way I could see him getting a long-term deal is if after your third year, you're able to get a contract extension. Bill could essentially say, we'll sign you to a 3-year deal. So instead of signing you to a 5-year deal after year 4, year 5, we'll sign you to a 3-year deal at not top of the market, but near top of the market. So you get that money. You can get your uh, contract 2 years earlier than you would if you go to free agency. So that might be a way where it's kind of fitting the bill, getting that second contract, but getting it earlier. So he doesn't take that pounding that by the time he does get to year 2, year 3 of that second year contract is not worth it. So that's one way I could see it happening. It just depends on his asking price. And if anything in the running back situation changes between now and either next year when he'd be eligible for the contract extension, or 2 years from now when his contract is up. Also, if he does hold out after next year, that could play a factor into it too.
Yeah.
Where he's holding out before year 4 because he wants that money. Will Bill cave a little bit, or he's going to say, no, I'll ride with what I got and what I can get in free agency? Because Bill, out of anyone, has shown that he can just bring in pretty much any running back and fit the bill here.
Yeah, I agree completely. So it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I think it's definitely a great question considering the complexity. Like I said, once I initially saw it, I was like, no, but I think there is a possibility where he could, based on all the different nuances going on right now.
Yep. Yeah, agree completely. I think this is the perfect kind of question where you really don't know yet, just because of the whole situation of Mondre and what the running backs are being paid now. Is he going to realize that? Is he going to say, well, I might as well just take a deal, so that way I got one? So really interesting question. Great job there, Pat's friend Kev. And that's pretty much all it for right now. So again, like we had mentioned, we have a blog coming out this week. Depending on when you listen to this episode, it may already be out or it may not be, and it'll be coming out this week. But the week of today's the 21st. Today is Monday. So this current week, the week of the 21st, expect to see a blog out there by Eric, possibly me as well, having what our 53-man roster projection is going to be, who are we going to have cut, who are going to have IR'd, who's going to make the team, what's going to happen, all that sort of stuff. Is it going to be right? Who knows? But we'll actually see.
And it will also include practice squad projections as well.
All right. So that'll be interesting. So again, you're going to catch that at pats300levelpod.com. And again, follow us on Instagram and Twitter at pats300levelpod. Pat's 300 level pod, and then subscribe, rate, and review on Apple, Spotify, Twitter, anywhere you consume your podcast, YouTube as well. Smash that like button and the subscribe button for that. So thank you very much. We'll be back at this again. Hopefully have a weekly podcast again after this kind of hiatus we had. So we'll break down next kind of what the kind of cut downs look like. Our preview for the upcoming 2023 season. We'll hopefully have a nice special guest that we're working on currently right now. So we'll have that when that comes. And then we'll get into the kind of the week by week cadence that we had last year, previewing upcoming games, reviewing what happened, so whatnot. All right. So thank you very much and look forward to talking to you guys next time.